Welcome to Overnight Market Brief, Pre-Market Edition. Good morning. Today is Friday, December 19th, 2025, and it is shortly after 8 a.m. Eastern Time. This is your Overnight Market Brief, covering global market developments over the past 14 hours, including how markets closed in North America, how futures have traded overnight, key moves across Europe and Asia, major macro events, and what investors should be watching as the North American session approaches. Before turning to overnight developments, it's worth briefly recapping how North American markets performed in the prior session. Looking back at the U.S. close, Wall Street ended the session firmly in the green. The S&P 500 settled at 6775, up 0.79%, while the Nasdaq 100 rallied 1.51% to close at 2519. The session was driven by a risk-on sentiment, fueled by softer-than-expected U.S. inflation data, which bolstered expectations of potential Federal Reserve rate cuts in the coming year. This provided a strong baseline for overnight futures action. Big picture. Overnight summary. Over the past 14 hours, global markets have been navigating a broadly positive environment. U.S. equity futures are indicating a higher open, while overseas markets have offered confirmation in sentiment. Overall, the overnight session reflects a market that is in a risk-on mode, with investors remaining focused on macro developments and positioning ahead of the North American Open. Turning to U.S. markets, S&P 500 futures are trading higher, currently up 0.23%, while Nasdaq futures are also trading higher by 0.39%. The relative performance between broad market and technology futures suggests a continuation of the tech-led rally from the previous session. Overnight price action appears driven more by the positive momentum from yesterday's inflation data than by any new stock-specific developments. This sets the tone for how U.S. markets may open later this morning, with the potential for a positive start to the trading day. In Europe, markets traded with a mixed to slightly negative tone during their session. European equity futures and cash markets, as referenced via Euro Stoxx 50 futures, which are currently down 0.05%, reacted primarily to a slew of regional economic data. German producer prices fell, indicating cooling inflation, while UK retail sales saw a slight decline. Bank of England Governor Bailey's comments about inflation nearing the 2% target by late spring also garnered attention. The European session provides a somewhat divergent signal from the more bullish sentiment in U.S. futures, suggesting that global investors are still weighing regional economic outlooks as they position for the North American trading day. Moving to Asia, the session was broadly positive. In Tokyo, the Nikkei 225 finished up by 1.03%, largely tracking Wall Street's lead and reacting to the Bank of Japan's widely expected rate hike, which signaled confidence in the domestic economy. Meanwhile, in Greater China, the sentiment was also positive. The Hang Seng in Hong Kong was up 0.25%, while the Shanghai Composite rose 0.36%, as traders reacted to hopes of further economic stimulus from Beijing. Across the region, sentiment remained upbeat, helping establish a positive overnight risk backdrop ahead of the U.S. Open. Looking across regions, the alignment between U.S. and Asian markets, contrasted with the more cautious tone in Europe, suggests that risk appetite remains healthy but not uniform. Overnight price action points to a market environment where investors are favoring equities, particularly in the U.S. and Asia, while remaining sensitive to macro signals and upcoming catalysts from Europe. On the macro front, key developments overnight included the Bank of Japan's interest rate decision and a host of European economic data, including German producer prices and UK retail sales, as highlighted on the global economic calendar. While these events did not trigger sharp market moves on their own, they continue to shape expectations around global inflation and central bank policy, which remains central to investor decision-making. What to watch in the North American session? Looking ahead to the North American trading day, investors will be watching whether overnight futures momentum carries into the cash session, as well as any reaction to scheduled economic releases or unexpected headlines. Given the current environment, markets may remain sensitive to any new inflation data, commentary from central bank officials, or shifts in geopolitical risk sentiment. That concludes your overnight market brief. As always, stay focused on positioning and risk management as the trading day unfolds. Disclaimer: this podcast is not financial advice. Data may be delayed or inaccurate. Always conduct your own due diligence.